Well, howdy there, folks. How are we doing today? Hopefully, you're all doing good. Peachy keen, fantastic, all that great stuff. Today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about viveka, discernment, and a couple of other things, since I thought it was a good topic last time and I wanted to continue on with it a little bit. See, viveka is not just discernment in the sense that you can tell one thing from another, although that is the major thing that we're going for here. There are elements that go into viveka, and there are elements that go into our understanding of what exactly is going on with things like this and why we need viveka to begin with. And I think that the Bhagavad Gita is actually a good place to start with this. And we're going to start a little bit in chapter 2 here, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 49. Seek refuge in divine knowledge and insight, O Arjun, and discard reward-seeking actions that are certainly inferior to works performed with the intellect established in divine knowledge. Miserly are those who seek to enjoy the fruits of the world. So, part of the reason we need viveka is not just because there are... Oh, that's kind of funny, I went through the wall. But part of the reason we need viveka is not just because, we need to be able to discern these things, but when we don't discern the permanent from the impermanent and the divine in every action, like what is real, what is that reality that we are aspiring to, that godly reality. And that could be slightly different depending on who exactly you are. If you're a Christian who is very into Jesus in particular, like when you're trying to discern and you're trying to focus your mind, you're trying to focus your mind more on Christ rather than maybe like Ramakrishna or somebody else. And any of these is fine. Focusing on God is great. But you see, when we don't have discernment, what happens? We go out into the world and we experience things. We experience, oh well, you know what? This is a nice cupcake, or this is a nice bit of food, or we start to latch on to sense pleasures, and we kind of start to do this thing where we're doing, like it says here, reward-seeking behavior. You're not just going into the world and experiencing the world. You're experiencing your world through a filtered lens that will focus on some things, not focus on other things, that will make certain things seem more important or less important, or nicer or worse, and things like that. And you don't really want that, because that's simply your mind playing tricks on you. It's the mind latching on to certain things, and it's part of the reason why you get so much anxiety and fear about certain things, because then the mind will focus on them in a particular way, and next thing you know, you have a bunch of things that you're like, oh, I have a great experience with that, so I go after it. How many people have tried, it's like, oh, I'm going to go on a diet, but because of the experiences they have in the world, and because they let their mind lead them to and fro, what they end up having is, oh, well, I need to go on a diet, but I was thinking about this all day. I was thinking about this particular sweet all day. I was thinking about ice cream all day, and now I just need to have some ice cream. Of course, that's not like a permanent pleasure. That's an impermanent pleasure. That's an attachment to something within the world, rather than the ability to look past that and move on to something that's more permanent and more holy, righteous type deal, if you want to call it that. What you're really trying to do, though, is not just embrace the idea of discernment in like these grander senses. You're also trying to embrace it in your everyday life. You're trying not to be drawn in by just like the pleasures of the world, or at the same time, you're also trying not to be drawn in by the opposite, which is like when you're have negative associations with the world. You see, the way our minds work, we have all these negative and positive associations with things, and from a survival standpoint, a lot of them make a lot of sense. You have a certain reluctance to engage in dangerous behavior. That's a good bit of discernment there. That's a good thing that your mind puts in you. But then you also have things where you'll start to think of, oh man, I hate interacting with this person, or oh man, it would be so much better if I just didn't have to interact with anybody, or oh man, this is so hard, this is so bad, I can't believe that this is happening. And the truth is that these are all distractions from the Lord, and what you're really trying to do is kind of step away from those sorts of interactions and not simply continue to have those sorts of interactions as your main thing. And as your brain goes out, and as you go into the world with your brain going, blah, 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 it's going to look at all kinds of different things, and it's going to, point, oh, yes, we want that. Oh, yeah, we don't want that. But, constantly seeking to get away from some things, to get away from things that are, we perceive as bad and get close to things that are good is not necessarily the best way to operate in the world, especially if we're just talking about like just sense pleasures and things like that. If we're just talking about, like, oh, I want to enjoy that cupcake or that cookie, or I want to, I want to get mad at somebody, and, ooh, being mad in the moment can feel kind of nice and things like that. What we're really trying to do more and more is when we are discerning, we're not trying to just embrace the sense pleasures that we've embraced in the past. We're trying to get further and further to the actual truth, to discerning, the impermanent from the permanent, to discerning what would get us closer to, let's say, Christ, for instance, versus what will push us further away. Not just these kind of simplistic pleasures that we end up getting so enamored with to begin with. But that's a big part of what discernment really is. And, the Bhagavad Gita continues on here. One who prudently practices the sciences of work without attachment can get rid of both good and bad reactions in this life itself. Therefore strive for yoga, which is the art of working skillfully in proper consciousness. The wise, endowed with equanimity and intellect, abandon attachment to the fruits of their actions, which bind one to the cycle of life and death. By working in such consciousness, they attain the state beyond all suffering. So, what you're trying to do is you're trying to abandon that attachment to the fruits of your actions, and very specifically, you're trying to abandon your attachments to the karma of the world, to the pleasures and things like that of the world, but also to, like, when you have a negative reaction thing, you're also trying to abandon both, so that you can go through the world unaffected by the pleasures and also unaffected by the sort of little pains and things that kind of work against you in the world. That's what you're really trying to establish. And you're trying to make it so that you can go through the world, and whatever is thrown at you, you can simply look at it and go, this is impermanent, and move through it. That's kind of like one of the ultimate goals there, but we really can do this, and it might take a while, but it's a practice that's worth doing. And then we go here in the verse 52. When your intellect crosses the quagmire delusions, you will then acquire indifference to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard about enjoyments in the world and the next. When your intellect ceases to be allured by the fruits of action, by the fruit of sections of the Vedas, and remain steadfast in divine consciousness, you will attain this state of perfect yoga. That's actually funny, because I do remember in one of the translations I read, they said the flowery language of the Vedas, and I thought that was kind of a funny way to look at it, because I was actually just recently reading some passages from the Vedas, and I will admit that I tried to understand that, yes, it can be very helpful to some people, but to me, a lot of it just felt like it wasn't actually all that helpful to what I was, like, really trying to accomplish, and, like, the spiritual states I was trying to get closer to and things like that. So it was interesting to kind of remember that the Bhagavad Gita talks about the Vedas as these kind of this flowery text, this kind of like fruit of text that isn't necessarily the best. And if you're wondering, in the footage itself, I tried on right card a couple of times. I got close, but I was still having a bit of trouble, so I decided to go get the mimic tier to get some help with that. Anyway, Arjun said, "Okay, Shav, what is the disposition of one who is situated in divine consciousness? How does an enlightened person talk? How does he sit? How does he walk?" The Supreme Lord said, "O Parth, When one discards all selfish desires and cravings of the senses that torment the mind. Oh, I lost my place there as I was looking at that on me. Okay, so I'll just start over. So this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 55. The Supreme Lord said, O Parth, when one discards all selfish action, all selfish desire and cravings of the senses that torment the mind and becomes satisfied in the realization of the self, such a person is said to be transcendentally situated. One whose mind remains undisturbed amid misery, who does not crave for pleasure, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady wisdom. So, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to become, as Krishna says, transcendentally situated. We're trying to be able to move among those things in the world and realize that they are, impermanent. Now, the thing about this is that, of course, this can be rather difficult. It can be rather difficult to sit there and just be like, oh, yes, this is, I understand, and I can just move through it. The Buddha described it as there's like two arrows. The Buddha described that part of what his teaching in particular was that there was the first arrow which hit you, and that's like the physical pain of something. That's like you get scratched and you go, ow, that hurts. The arrow he's trying to remove is the arrow which will basically be your reaction to that and being like really dissatisfied, be like, oh, I've been scratched and I can't believe I've been scratched, and oh my goodness, this shouldn't possibly have happened, I can't even believe it, and blah 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 blah. Basically that, like, we have these two arrows, so we'll have one thing that is the negative reaction to the thing, and then we'll continue it onward. And what we're trying to do is not let that happen. So and then in just a few verses on, when he says this, one who remains unattached under all conditions and is neither delighted by good fortune or nor dejected by tribulation, he is a sage with perfect knowledge. One who is able to withdraw the senses from their objects, just as the tortoise withdraws its limbs into its shell, is established in divine wisdom. What are we really discerning here? What are we trying to get at? What we're trying to get at specifically is what is that which is permanent? What is that which is not just a fleeting form of the Lord? Because the Lord takes on so many shapes in this whole universe, and that's kind of like one of the things about it, right? Like, the thing about it is that the Lord is at play in this universe all the time, and all of these things are divine shapes, but so much of this is, like, disturb our mind and make us like go out hither and thither and chase all over the place trying to find the perfect thing, whatever we think will satisfy us. But the true satisfaction is within the Lord. Now, I came back to this real quick, just to come back to the footage for just a second. So basically what happened is I was recording fighting Rykard. I don't know if the footage got corrupted or what exactly happened. It was just gone. So I killed Rykard. And it would have been cool for you to see the mimic, but it's fine. There's a big wave. But it's not really that big of a deal. You say, once again, we're not going to be too attached to a silly thing. Next time on my next playthrough, I'm just going to like force myself to make sure I show this part. But the really important part is one who's able to withdraw their senses from objects, not clinging onto things. So the discernment here is, okay, well, my senses, I will revel in the glory of the Lord. I will revel in bhakti. I will revel in, the pleasures of God and those sorts of things, if I want to revel in any pleasures at all. But I will be very specific. What we're really trying to do is make that discernment and really trying to understand that, like, these feelings we have that are like so negative or so positive, whatever they may be, they will pass. And obsession with the world, you've seen people who are like, billionaires and spend all their money on this stuff, and then you can see that, well, it doesn't really matter, all this stuff that they spend their money on, because it's not permanent, it's not going to stick with them, it all fades away. And the Lord is the one thing that does not fade away. The Divine Mother is the one thing that does not fade away. And we should bow at her lotus feet and get the pleasure from interacting with her more than anything. And aspirants may restrain the senses from their objects, of enjoyment, but the taste of the sense objects remains. However, this taste ceases for those who realize the supreme. The senses are so strong and turbulent, O son of Kunti, that they can forcibly carry away the mind even with the person endowed with discrimination who practices self-control. They are established in perfect knowledge who subdue their senses and keep their minds ever absorbed in me. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take our senses specifically really away from the world, and we're trying to take our senses away from the world, and we're trying to get very particularly to focus on God who is everlasting and immortal. Like we have all these things that are distracting us, and the truth is we need to realize that A, we are of God, and B, we can focus on God in all things. And by absorbing our mind in God, absorbing our mind in the divine, we can, in fact, come to better realizations and come to better moments and be really practicing that discernment. You may notice, if you remember from last week, the next part is dispassion. And part of that dispassion is included in this. We're trying to become less passionate towards the world. But before we can even truly become less passionate towards just like the world as it is, what we need to do is be able to see what is and is not permanent. We know now the discernment is that God is the highest, that we are striving towards God, that we are striving towards that perfection. And if we have moments of mishap, we shouldn't think too poorly of ourselves, and we shouldn't think that, oh well, I don't have enough discernment yet, or I don't have enough of what is required yet, but what you should be focused on is just like neti, not this. You should not be focused on the small things in the world and things like that. What you should really be focused on is being absorbed in the Lord. Absorb your concentration in the Lord. Absorb your concentration in your desire to get close to the Lord, in your desire to always come back to the Lord no matter what's happening, and always be willing to change your action. If you feel like you're not doing something that is, getting you closer to the Lord, have those moments where you're willing to really look at what you're doing and figure out, is this part of the permanent, or is this some of that impermanent stuff that we were talking about? Is this the thing that's going to take you to the next level, or is this the thing that's simply going to keep you where you are? And this is why we need discernment. We need the ability to stop and look at these things and really understand what they are, where they are, and try not to get absorbed in them, and instead get absorbed in the Lord. Which is kind of funny to say right next to Rykard's head. But hey, is what it is. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation, and I would highly recommend reading the Bhagavad Gita, but also specifically for today, reading the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and kind of focusing in on that a little bit more. Anyway, thank you all so much for stopping by. I want you to know that I love you and that God loves you, and bye-bye, I love you, bye. Have a great one.